I just kind of want to start out. I got tears in my eyes because that song that was played is a song that has gotten me personally through many dark times in my life. A little bit of background to my story because it's will help you understand more as I go. I was born to my mom and dad. My dad was married to someone else. I was never really brought up in religion. The only time religion was ever brought into my life was through my grandmother, and that was when I was younger. So I always thought of Jesus being somebody that was not for me because my dad's side of the family was very religious. My dad was like the black sheep, and things always seemed perfect in their life. And I always thought it was because we wasn't going to church. But my aunts made me believe that you had to be fixed in order to go to church. It wasn't for the broken. So it kind of separated me from wanting anything to do with faith and religion, because I didn't understand why some people had it, so wonderful, it seemed in my eyes as a child, and, others was just suffering. Why didn't he help those that was suffering? Why did you have to be perfect, to go to church? So as I got older, I, of course, realized that, that wasn't the case. I lost my dad when I was 23. And when I lost my dad, I felt like I had lost everyone that had really accepted me for who I was and not, being perfect. I tried to commit suicide when I was 16. My mom wanted to kind of shove it under the rug, and my dad wanted to get down to the bottom of it, like, what is going on? So as a teenager, I started struggling with mental health. After my dad passed away, it was mental health. I experimented with drugs, and I ended up a drug addict. I lost my notes that I had for this, so I apologize. But so I lost my dad, and like I said, I experimented with some drugs. I became addicted to drugs. I lost my kids. Then my husband and I took off from here to head to Colorado in 2014. In 2015, we happened to walk into a church where Sherry and Scott attended. That's how I had originally met them. When I walked into that church, it was the first church that I ever walked into that I felt accepted. I really felt like I was walking into home. So I was baptized because I had never gotten baptized, because I didn't think that was something that you were supposed to do until you decided, you wanted to walk the path of, following God and his word. So I was never baptized until 2015. But got my kids back sober for 4 or 5 years, then relapsed. When I relapsed, I reached out to the CPS and asked them for some help, because I knew, first of all, I needed to be held accountable. I needed somebody to step in and make me be accountable, because I didn't want to lose my kids like I had done before. They instead stepped in and took my kids right away. I lost my house. My husband was in jail, so I became homeless. So here was a whole new struggle with mental health, addiction, not really knowing anymore where I quite fit in with God, because I had been baptized and then I went back on what I was supposed to be doing. So I honestly didn't know like where I stood anymore, who I really was, what I was supposed to be doing. So homelessness, I want to bring awareness to. I have never thought in my life I would have ever become homeless. Instead, God had other plans. I became homeless for 3 years, and I learned a lot in that 3 years. He brought me out of my addiction, though, in my homelessness. I didn't have anywhere else to turn but to him. Like, he took me to the bottom, he was all I had to turn to. And got my kids home. I bought me a $500 RV that I'm living in right now still, but it got my kids home, and it got me sober to where I'm still sober today. I'm disabled. I've had 2 spine surgeries. I'm currently fighting for my disability from all of that, have been for 3 or 4 years. How I ended up getting back with Sherry was I reached out to her because I was trying to find something that I could do from home to get me some income while I'm waiting, on all these other things. And Sherry kind of took me under her wing and is trying to help me get my story out there, because there's just so many little things with homelessness and addiction and mental health that people just don't even know. People think they throw their money to these charities and that these people are taken care of, and that's really not how it is. For example, I have waited 3 years in Colorado for housing. I moved here. I've been on the housing list for a year. I get a call last week, my number came up, but I don't qualify for low income housing because I had an eviction for unpaid rent in 2014. 10 years ago is keeping me from getting housing. Me and Sherry has worked together. I took her indigo assessment thing, and it was like me to a T. I known that I've always wanted to reach out and help less fortunate than me, because like I said, I've learned in my years that you're supposed to go out and meet people in their darkness. You're supposed to be their light. They don't have to be perfect to walk into a church. They can have, as far as I'm concerned, you can sit down with somebody on the side of the road that has a drink in their hand and you can talk about Jesus. Just because he's not saved that day doesn't mean you didn't start the path for him to get there, or put that little, light in their head. So that's a big thing for me. Mental health, there's not really a whole lot. A long time ago, mental health was shoved under the rug for everyone. If you had a mental health issue, you got locked up in an asylum. Your family, just completely forgot about you. And there's just so many things that intertwine that I have personally experienced, that through talking to Sherry, I've realized that many people aren't aware of. Like Sherry would have no idea that somebody that had an eviction 10 years ago isn't going to qualify for housing. A lot of that is not told. People dish out this money and they want to know, well, why aren't these people being housed, or why are they still doing this? And it's because there's more and more barriers for anyone. I have moved to Missouri because I couldn't afford Colorado. My husband is in prison. So I came here with my family. We have 6 family members that are trying to go in on some property because it's just so, so hard. I have to get medical transportation to my appointments. That takes a whole day. I wait sometimes 2 hours to be picked up. I get dropped off 2 hours early. I have to wait 2 more hours, to get a ride. And if I wasn't on or if I wasn't waiting for disability, other people that live in rural areas like I do, how do they take care of their needs to get out of their poverty? And so working with Sherry, I first thought that, and I still do believe that part of my life purpose is to go to those dark places and reach out to those people that no one else really wants to, because they're out of their mind on drugs and they're scared to death. Where I've lived in that world and they don't scare me to death. I know that they're really harmless. They're really people that are crying out for help, a lot of them. And, but everybody just wants to throw money to these, to the homeless shelter or to whatever, and, not know why nothing's being taken care of. Well, nobody's stepping out to reach those that really need it. And the ones that do, there's just more and more barriers that keeps you frustrated, just makes you give up. And then you go back to whatever cycle that you've been in. You know, I know, there's a big methamphetamine epidemic, and I know that to most people, they say, well, that's just an excuse for a drug addict, but they don't realize a lot of people will take methamphetamines. That's how they get started on it, is because they're having to move their stuff from site to site to site. If you fall asleep, everything could get stolen, and like I said, I know that to normal people, they say, well, that's just an excuse for them to use. And in a sense it is, but in another sense, in your mind, you're thinking, how can I save my stuff? I can't lose my stuff. It's going to be 10 degrees tomorrow night. I can't lose my sleeping bag, and like I said, it just starts spiraling out of control. Another thing that I want to bring awareness to is, I've realized, so when my dad passed away, I didn't talk to any of his family. About 3 weeks ago, Sherry, I went to the family reunion. I hadn't seen my family in 22 years. And I learned really how much your family dynamic plays a role in how you turn out. I have 25 cousins. All of my aunts and uncles are still married. All of my cousins are still married. I came from a broken home. Me and my brother are both divorced. So it just, it was just amazing to me, really, to see how well, everyone else was doing. And, really, me and my brother, coming from where we came from, we don't do near as well as, any of them. Because when we were brought up, our dad used drugs, they drank, he hung out with all of his friends. So that became a norm to us. We thought every family in America must be that way. So, as we grew up, knowing that that's how it was, trying drugs, trying alcohol, it wasn't no big deal. Everybody did it. So we thought. So I just really, I'm hoping to bring awareness to really mental health, things that homeless people go through that really nobody knows. I want to be the voice. I want to be something bigger for those people, because a lot of it is not known. And on my path, I'm really not quite sure yet whether it's the bigger picture that I'm going to be helping, or if it's just going to be reaching maybe one individual at a time. I don't know, but I know that I'm well on my way, and I really can't wait.
Thank you so much, Mia. That was an amazing frontline story of what's really going on.
Well, I used to consider myself a victim to many things, and I'm not a victim. I'm an overcomer of many things, because I found my faith in God, and, I learned who he was on my own and in the way I wanted to learn about him. And I just want to reach out and be the light to, people that people are afraid to shine their light on.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. We're going to open up to questions, but what I was really struck with many of the pieces of wisdom from what you shared was that you are a voice for people who don't have a voice. You're already doing that, and you're not just helping one person, because you're speaking to a group today, for example, and you're helping people understand something that is very complicated, and a lot of us are very detached from. But the spiral from mental health to drug abuse to homelessness, for example, is an epidemic in the country, as is meth, as is opioids.
Yes.
And we can't really get a handle. It's very easy to judge people and just sort of, get your act together. I think what you do beautifully is tell the story of how this can happen, based on the way, what you've learned as a child. And the fact that you don't see yourself as a victim, but you see yourself called by God to be a voice for those folks, is fantastic. It's amazing. It's beautiful. So I do want to thank you for being a voice. I think by bringing awareness, you have the potential to break cycles, because you've broken cycles in your own life. And so all of us, not everybody's wrestling with mental health, not everybody's wrestling with addiction, and not everybody's wrestling with homelessness, but we're all wrestling. And and with stressful situations that often we don't want to share. So I also appreciate your just being so transparent and just sharing everything so honestly and forthright, because that also takes the shame away, as was demonstrated in the song that you chose today, which that song was really about how we become so ashamed that we don't get help. We don't even seek a faith path because of shame. And sadly, to your point early on, the church kind of projects an image that you need to be fixed, as you said, to be in it. And uh, it's like a hospital saying, you need to be healthy to come to the hospital to get help for spiritual health. It doesn't make any sense. We're all broken. That's just by the nature of humanity, and we're all in need of God's help and guidance at different ways. But the idea that church projects and church people project an image they've got everything together can really scare people away from seeking it. So I think your message is extremely important and very Christ-like, because Christ was obsessed with talking about the poor and the plight of the poor and caring for the poor. And so you're echoing the words of Christ when you're doing what you're doing. So really appreciated